It is 1970, deep in the rugged, redwood-scented hills of Northern California.
Right, a very specific vibe.
Exactly. And a 24-year-old Neil Young has just used this sudden, massive windfall of wealth to purchase a sprawling 140-acre property.
He drops $350,000 on it, which back then was an absolute fortune.
It really was. He's fresh off the massive success of the Deja Vu album. He renames the place Broken Arrow Ranch, and he's basically just seeking a quiet sanctuary, you know.
Yeah, he wants to hide away from the high-pressure music machinery of Los Angeles.
Right. And the action really starts when Young takes a tour of this newly acquired kingdom. He is riding shotgun in this old, beat-up blue army jeep.
Driven by Louis Avila, right?
Yep, Louis Avila. He's the elderly foreman, the caretaker who has lived on and worked that exact land for years, long before some famous musicians showed up with a checkbook.
So they reach the top of the property overlooking these beautiful lakes and green pastures.
And Avila, who is a man completely defined by a lifetime of hard physical labor, just looks over at this long-haired, 24-year-old rock star.
And he has some very blunt, practical question. He says, how does a young man like yourself have enough money to buy a place like this?
Which is just the ultimate reality check for a rock star.
Oh, absolutely.
And Young, feeling the profound absurdity of his sudden wealth, just gives this quiet, slightly uncomfortable answer. He says, just lucky, Louis, just real lucky.
It's such a striking interaction. And that brief, kind of awkward encounter in the Jeep sparked one of the greatest acoustic anthems of the 1970s.
Yeah, because Avila essentially became a moral mirror for Young.
Exactly. Instead of feeling triumphant about his massive new estate, the rich hippie realized he felt this deep, unexpected kinship with the aging caretaker.
Young wrote that famous lyric, "Old man, look at my life, I'm a lot like you were." And he didn't write it out of condescension, but really as a confession of his own profound loneliness.
It was a very vulnerable moment.
You are listening to Deep Cuts and Deep Thinking. Today, we are going on a deep dive into a stack of studio session notes, biographies, and cultural retrospectives.
We're trying to figure out how a deeply personal song about rural isolation accidentally created a mainstream pop superstar.
Our mission is to take apart the architecture of a masterpiece and understand the mechanics of why it still resonates so powerfully today.
It really is a fascinating journey.
Okay, let's unpack this, because looking through these biographies, I actually have to push back on the fundamental premise of this song's empathy.
How so?
Well, you have a 24-year-old millionaire. He is a global rock star, and he is looking at a grizzled working-class laborer and saying, hey, we are basically the same.
Right, I see where you're going with this.
I mean, rich people co-opting working-class aesthetics is a pretty tired trope. How do we know Neil Young isn't just playing dress-up as an authentic rancher? It borders on arrogance, honestly.
That's a fair point, but this raises an important question about how we interpret the perspective of the songwriter.
Okay, I'm listening.
To understand why it isn't arrogance, we have to look at the dual address of the lyrics. Externally, looking from the outside in, the two men are complete opposites.
Right, in terms of class, age, wealth, power.
Exactly. Young holds the deed to the land, but Avila holds the actual knowledge of the earth. Young knows literally nothing about running a ranch.
So what's the internal perspective then?
Internally, the song functions as a preemptive eulogy for Young's own youth.
A preemptive eulogy, meaning he is grieving something he hasn't even fully lost yet.
Yeah, look at his personal state at that exact moment in 1970. He's 24, and he has already been through an emotional ringer.
He was going through a divorce around then, right?
Yes, navigating the fallout of a divorce and entering a fragile new relationship with the actress Carrie Snodgrass. He is suddenly incredibly rich, but he is deeply, profoundly isolated.
Oh, which perfectly explains the lyric, "Live alone in a paradise," that makes me think of two.
Exactly. That line illustrates his realization that material success, buying a 140-acre paradise, cannot buy emotional permanence.
He's begging for things that don't get lost.
Right. So in that context, Louis Avila isn't just a ranch hand to Young. He is a cautionary symbol. Avila represents the solitude and isolation that Young fears he is destined for.
Regardless of how many records he sells.
Exactly.
So the empathy is actually rooted in fear. He is looking at this old man and realizing his money isn't going to save him from ending up just as lonely as he feels right now.
That's the core psychological paradox of the song.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because having established this intense, lonely, isolated emotion in the lyrics, they had to actually capture that feeling in the studio.
And if you look at the session notes, the way they recorded it seems completely counterintuitive to the message of the song.
It really does. The recording session happens on February 6, 1971 at Quadraphonic Sound Studios in Nashville.
Right around noon, they just gather everyone together.
And to me, it's like trying to paint a picture of a desolate, lonely desert, but inviting all your famous friends over to help hold the brushes.
It was quite the star-studded room.
He brings in massive superstars like James Taylor and Linda Ronstadt. Doesn't having pop royalty on the track threaten to ruin the raw, isolated feel of a song about a solitary rancher?
You would think so. But what's fascinating here is how the production actively fought against that slickness. The engineers and musicians deliberately crafted a raw landscape despite their pedigree.
How did they manage that?
Well, for instance, when James Taylor and Linda Ronstadt recorded their backing vocals, they didn't put them in isolated vocal booths with pristine headphones.
Which was the standard procedure for getting a clean pop vocal, right?
Totally. Instead, they literally sat casually on a couch together in the control room. The backing track was playing back over the main studio monitors right there in the room with them.
Wait, so the sound of the room and the music from the speakers bled directly into their microphones?
Yes, exactly. They allowed the bleed.
That's wild. Usually, engineers spend hours trying to eliminate mic bleed to keep the mix perfectly clean. They basically baked the acoustic imperfections right into the master tape.
They did. And by allowing that bleed, it gave the recording a live, human, almost campfire choir feel. They sound like friends singing along in a living room, not a polished studio choir.
That makes a lot of sense.
But the most crucial element James Taylor brought to the session wasn't actually his voice. It was his instrument. He played a 6-string banjo on the track.
A 6-string banjo is an unusual choice. Why not use a standard 5-string banjo if you want a country sound? Or just stick to acoustic guitars?
Because a 6-string banjo is strung and tuned exactly like a standard guitar.
Oh, so Taylor could play it using his usual finger-picking style.
Right, without having to learn new chord shapes. Yeah. But the mechanics of the instrument yield a bright metallic clanging sound. It sits high in the audio mix.
And it provides this rhythmic staccato ticking throughout the entire song.
Exactly. Musically, it represents the mechanical cyclical passage of time. It functions almost like a clock ticking away the years on the ranch.
Wow. It grounds the song in dirt and wood rather than studio gloss. And reading through the music theory analysis in our sources, there is a specific mechanism working in the chords to create that feeling of dread too.
Oh, the harmonic structure is deceptively complex.
Because it doesn't sound like a happy pop song, even though it relies on acoustic instruments.
Right. So the song is rooted in D major. Let's break down the mechanics of that.
Yeah.
A D major chord belongs to a major scale, which has a very specific pattern of intervals.
And we are culturally conditioned to hear major scales as bright, triumphant, or uplifting.
Exactly. When you are playing in D major, the listener expects the next chords to follow the rules of that happy scale. But the main riff shifts from that bright D major to a borrowed F major chord.
Okay, explain how a borrowed chord works for someone who doesn't read sheet music.
Sure. In the key of D major, the F note should normally be sharp to keep the happy major tonality intact. But by playing a natural F chord, Young is borrowing a chord from the sadder parallel minor key. It completely breaks the established rules of the scale the listener has settled into.
It's like a sudden cloud covering the sun. It pulls the rug out from under the listener.
That tension is exactly what the music theory is meant to convey. The D major represents the paradise, the sudden wealth, the beautiful California landscape.
And the F major.
The F major chord introduces a sudden drop in frequency that creates a feeling of melancholy. It represents the somber reality of the old man's world, the hard labor, and the inevitable aging process.
And anchoring all of this is the bass guitar, right? Which just walks this steady, inevitable line underneath the chords.
Refusing to let the song float away into pure pop territory. Every technical choice serves the emotional tension.
I want to zoom out for a second and look at the cultural landscape. Because this song didn't just exist in a vacuum.
Not at all.
1972, when the album Harvest finally drops, was a very strange time for you to be alive if you were part of the youth culture.
It was a massive period of transition.
It feels like the entire counterculture woke up with a massive hangover after the 1960s, looked around at the chaos, and collectively decided to start a vegetable garden.
That is a brilliant way to put it. If we connect this to the bigger picture, your analogy highlights exactly what was happening with the early 1970s Back to the Land movement.
Because people were fleeing the cities in droves, right?
They were. The optimism of the 1960s had violently fractured. You had the trauma of the Vietnam War dragging on with no end in sight.
And the domestic protests were getting violent.
Exactly. You had the horrific shootings at Kent State in May of 1970, where the National Guard fired on unarmed college students. And you had the violence at the Altamont Music Festival,
which effectively killed the myth of peace and love.
Right. Urban youth were exhausted, disillusioned, and traumatized. So they retreated to nature, seeking self-sufficiency. They were trying to find a simpler truth away from the political machine.
So Neil Young buying a 140-acre ranch is basically the ultimate, most expensive manifestation of that exact trend.
Yes, an old man synthesizes the massive generational clash of that era perfectly.
Yeah.
You have the baby boomers, represented by Young, who are on this restless search for spiritual meaning.
Searching for a heart of gold, trying to find themselves.
Right. And on the other side, you have the silent generation, represented by Avila. Their lives are defined by local, pragmatic, physical labor. They just run around the same old town.
Usually those two generations in the early 70s were screaming at each other across a dinner table about the war or civil rights.
But here, they're just looking at each other quietly.
Wow. The song became the definitive musical artifact of the agrarian counterculture because it bypassed the toxic politics of the era and found a shared language in human mortality.
The boomer and the silent generation worker suddenly realize they both get old, they both get lonely, they both need someone to love them the whole day through.
It bridges the gap between two deeply alienated demographics.
It really does.
So what does this all mean for Neil Young's career? We have a song that is, at its core, a deeply personal confession of alienation.
It's quite dark when you really listen to it.
It's a meditation on the fear of dying alone despite having all the money in the world. How does a song with that much existential dread help drive the Harvest album to #1 in the United States in 1972?
The commercial explosion really comes down to the sonic packaging.
What do you mean?
Well, before this, Young was known for a raw, electric, aggressive sound with his backing band, Crazy Horse. Those records featured lots, distortion, long jams, and a very unpolished aesthetic.
Right, very gritty.
But for the Harvest sessions in Nashville, used a group of seasoned session musicians called the Stray Gators. They were professionals who provided this slicker, radio-friendly country rock sound.
So the rough edges were sanded down.
Exactly. The lead guitar parts are understated, replaced by weeping pedal steel and smooth acoustic strumming.
So the instrumentation sounded beautiful and comforting, even if the lyrics were heavy and terrifying.
Right. The massive commercial success of Harvest suddenly made Neil Young a mainstream pop staple, right alongside folks like James Taylor and Carole King.
Which is pretty ironic.
He was suddenly making music that conservative parents could enjoy in the family station wagon, completely unaware of the existential dread baked into the lyrics.
Which, knowing everything we do about his personality, he must have absolutely hated.
Oh, he loathed it. He was notoriously uneasy with fame to begin with, but this specific type of accessible middle-class fame drove him crazy.
I can imagine.
He has a famous quote about the success of Heart of Gold and Old Man. He said that those songs put him in the middle of the road.
A middle of the road.
Yeah, and he found the middle of the road so boring that he intentionally headed for the ditch.
The ditch, meaning the dark, unpolished, deeply abrasive records that came immediately after Harvest, like Tonight's the Night.
Exactly. He practically torched his own mainstream appeal on purpose. He wanted to get back to the raw, ragged truth of his art, away from the slick Nashville session sound.
So the grand paradox of Old Man is that a song fundamentally about the emptiness and isolation of success is exactly what cemented his status as a global superstar.
He wrote a song about fearing the trap of his own life, and the world loved it so much they locked the trap shut.
It's a warning label that everyone mistook for a welcome mat, and, it really leaves you with a profound thought about the nature of time.
How so?
Well, when Neil Young first sang Old Man in that Nashville studio, he was a 24-year-old kid looking forward. He was staring at Louis Avila, trying to project himself into the future.
Right, trying to imagine the physical and emotional weight of old age.
But now, as you watch Neil Young perform this song today in his late 70s, something incredible happens.
The song hasn't changed at all, but the singer has completely caught up to the subject matter.
Exactly. The musical architecture, that D to borrowed F major shift, the 6-string banjo ticking away in the background, it is all exactly the same.
But the gravitational pull of the song has completely flipped.
Right. He is the old man now. When he sings it today, he is singing a lullaby, backward through time, reaching out to his own 24-year-old self.
That's a beautiful way to think about it.
It proves that the song wasn't just a snapshot of a random afternoon at Broken Arrow Ranch. It was a time machine he built in 1971, just waiting for him to finally catch up to it.
Time goes past, just like the ticking of that banjo.
It really makes you wonder about the artifacts you are leaving behind in your own life. When you write a journal entry, take a photograph, or even just send a deeply personal message to a friend during a difficult time, you probably think you're just documenting the present moment.
You don't think about the long-term impact.
Right. But what if you were accidentally building a time capsule for your future self to confront decades from now? Are the things you are building today just waiting for you to grow old enough to finally understand what they really meant?
It's definitely something to think about.
If you found this podcast interesting, please like and subscribe. Thank you for joining us today.